So I was sitting around enjoying my life doing absolutely nothing because when I'm not making videos for you guys, I basically disappear into the ether only to return once again to provide content for you. When my girlfriend texted me, somehow it got into the ether, a video from the discount third string knockoff of The View, The Real Talk, about how the term LatinX is offensive and how they want to correct the notions that Latinx is somehow an offensive term. This video is absolutely hilarious. I bring it to you in good faith. It is my gift to you. But first, before we get into this noble sounding idea of fixing the Spanish language from its dirty genderness, before we talk about this golden nugget that has been dropped upon me for me to make responses to, we gotta talk about Noble Gold! Oh my god, you guys didn't even know that was transitioning into an ad even. That's amazing on my part in every way. Right now, something is just not adding up in the economy. Stocks are at all-time highs, but the government just borrowed $5 trillion. We're being told that inflation is just transitory, but it just went up 6.8%. This isn't making any sense, people. How much did your wages go up during this transitory time? And compare that to the transitory nature of gas prices and electricity prices, and you'll know that something's going on. And the best way to hedge against this is to put some of your money in precious metals. Right now, if you call Noble Gold Investments and open up a precious metals IRA, you can get this amazing gift, an America the Beautiful 5-ounce silver coin. It's really cool. It's a giant quarter. I like it. I promote it on the pass. I keep it near me at all times because I think it's awesome, and you can get one of them and talk to a specialist if you go to noblegoldinvestments.com using my affiliate link pinned comment and top of the description, or you call them at 877-646-5347. Again, that's 877-646-5347.
There's an article on Newsweek.com that states only 2% of Hispanic voters refer to themselves as Latinx, while nearly half find the term to be, now this is half, offensive.
So anyone familiar with the polling data surrounding Latinx knows for a fact that this term is not popular among the Latino community. You can just go by the fact that only 2% of these people use it. I think according to a Pew poll, about 75% never heard of it, but among the people that have actually heard of it, the overwhelming majority of them completely reject the term on its face. And this is for a number of reasons. First and foremost, this just does not fit in with the Spanish language. If you're going to invent a term to bully Hispanics into submitting to the transes, then you should at least invent a term that fits well within the language. The X sound in Spanish is X, as been told to me by members of my family, by my girlfriend, and every other Hispanic that I've met on the street and just randomly asked about this, which is, by the way, something I do all the time. I just go up to them and I'll be like, what do you think of Latinx? And how do you feel about the term? And then they tell me that they don't like it, and they talk about how, again, X doesn't really fit at the end of the word, and Spanish, like all love languages, already has a mechanism to deal with gender-neutral situations. For the most part, the O pronoun, O's, or O, works as a substitute for gender neutral or places where you don't understand the gender. So this is an outside solution. It's something that I like to call linguistic thuggery, because these people are trying to bully into the Spanish language, tell Spanish speaking people that their language is dirty, filthy, and disgusting, and it needs to be corrected to be in line with modern progressive values, because Hispanics rank far below the transes in terms of the intersectional hierarchy. It's absolutely disgusting. It is thuggish in nature, which is why I call it linguistic thuggery, and I think we should reject it whole cloth, and I'm very happy that Latinos are doing so.
Adrian, for those who may not know, could you please give us the definition of Latinx?
Latinx. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it's a person of Latin American origin or descent used as a gender-neutral or non-binary alternative to Latino or Latina.
According to Oxford Dictionary, it's a gender-neutral alternative made up by not people in the Hispanic or Latino community. And by the way, I have to give some credit to this discount rundown version of The View, The Real Talk, because not everybody on the panel is in favor of the term Latinx in the way that this Latina woman is right here. And if you remember my previous video about how these people reacted insanely to the whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing, this was the woman that just kept screaming, "How?" like crazy in the middle of that video. So we're going to play a little bit of her going, "How?" just so you can understand the kind of person, the kind of character, the kind of caliber of intellect and emotional discipline that we're dealing with.
If the majority of a culture embraces and doesn't embrace a certain term, should it be implemented in mainstream culture? That's the question I want to ask you, ladies. So, what do you think?
Yes. Yes, it should. I absolutely believe that it should.
You could tell by the reaction to her just saying, yes, yes, I think it should be embraced, even though the other people on the panel even have pause about this, because what this is what people talk about when they talk about cultural domination. They're saying that the majority, the mainstream of society, which for the talk that we're having right now is white society, should they be using this term if Hispanics, who according to them are oppressed minorities, do not like it? And this Hispanic is selling her people down the river according to their logic, and all these other intersectional arguments about cultural dominance imposing their will on the minority and thus the oppressed culture. They're shocked by it. So these people are being more ideologically consistent in their view of this, even though they support the transes. But this person has devoted and basically sworn at the altar of the transes. So she's like, yes, it needs to be done. We need to have this. We need to say everybody who's Latino or Latina, or specifically Latino, because that's the gender neutral term and the male term, that they are in fact Latin X.
I understand that, crazy enough, guys, if you hear these numbers, according to Pew survey, only 23% of Hispanic adults have ever even heard of the term Latinx. So to say that 50% of us are offended and 23% of us are only have heard of it is interesting to me.
Imagine being this bad at your job. Imagine being this bad at argumentation. Imagine being this terrible at reasoning. So her counter argument to 50% of the people who are asked find the term Latin X offensive is to respond by saying, well, actually, 75% of the Hispanics haven't even heard of it, so how can they be offended upon this thing that I'm trying to enforce upon them? Now, only 2% of them actually use it, which would show you even amongst the people who have heard of it, the overwhelming majority reject the term, but her ideological thing about defending and standing up for the transes and making the transes the dominant class in the United States of America is preventing her from seeing that she just quoted numbers showing that Hispanics and Latinos have zero interest in this term. And by the way, I'm mentioning the transes and I'm talking about the transes during the course of this video, but make no mistake, the majority of transes, I do not believe, are trying to control language. This is the work of transes activism and not necessarily each and every individual transes. I would assume if you're actually a regular transes and you're not a left-wing activist, that you probably have a lot more interesting things going on in your life than to try to control a language that you probably don't even speak. So this isn't all the transes. I think it skews heavily towards the non-binaries who may or may not actually be a part of the transes. Maybe that's a category error. Non-binary should be their own thing. But even amongst all the non-binaries, probably it's not the overwhelming majority opinion that we need to fix the Spanish language because it's broken and it bothers my feelings because I don't understand how love languages work. So not all the transes, let's just be clear about that. Not all of them. Heavily skewed toward the non-binaries is, but not all the transes.
To say that it's offensive, I don't think it's offensive to move with the times. Is it difficult? Is it hard to learn these new terms and use them on a daily basis? Yes, I think it takes some time to get used to it.
I absolutely love the condescension from this woman on this topic. She's literally talking down to other Hispanics who don't like the term because the term conflicts with how the language is structured and how the language works and is clearly being opposed. She's like, listen, I know it's difficult to say Latin X all the time instead of actually speaking the Spanish language the way that it was intended, the way that it is spoken across the world. But really, this is progress and you guys just need to evolve.
If you're offended, why weren't you offended when we just called everyone in general Latino? When you use the term of like a mass of Latin people, you say, oh, ¿a dónde están mis Latinos? Where's my Latinos at? And that is the male version of it. If that didn't offend you, why does LatinX offend you?
Why weren't you offended when we used O and O's in order to describe people in general? How come that didn't offend you? Because that's the way the Spanish language has evolved over time. That's the way that it actually works. This is something that has been promulgated and spread throughout the world. Spanish is one of the most dominant languages in human history, and this is how it functions. This is how all other Latin-rooted languages function. There's history and tradition embedded in the language, and something that occurred over time naturally and has been something that is normalized among all these Spanish-speaking peoples and all these Latin-rooted language-speaking peoples shouldn't be overridden by linguistic thugs like yourself.
Well, it doesn't offend me, but for me personally, I don't know why everything has to be modernized. Like when we started saying African American, I didn't like that. I'm not from Africa.
Yeah.
I'm Haitian, right? So for me, I feel like, why do we need to do all this stuff? Why can't we leave things the way they are and really focus on inclusivity and not necessarily the name of a group?
Again, I've done a number of segments on the Real Talk. I have made fun of them for their ridiculous takes, most recently the Rittenhouse video, but this woman is 100% on point. And by the way, this is a sentiment that has been shared to me by many Haitian black people in the United States of America. And she shared it in a much more elegant way than it was told to me when I referred to a Haitian person as an African American. But nonetheless, I understand the idea that we need to modernize and relabel things just for the sake of it makes no sense. And as she said, if you're worried about inclusivity, we should argue for inclusivity rather than do something that is clearly not inclusive. It's oppressive, it's thuggery against a minority population in the United States of America. Because make no mistake, this isn't a debate, this isn't a conversation in Latin American countries. That's not a thing, that's not how it works. Mexico isn't thinking about renaming their nation to Mexic-X. My Puerto Rican side of the family is not contacting me that Puerto Rico is about to become Puerto Rico-X. This is something that is clearly and obviously within the confines of the United States of America among upper wealthy people with nothing better to do, and transes activists who, again, are just trying to impose their will on people through the act of linguistic thuggery.
And it's LatinX. That's what the
Yeah, it's Latinx if you're saying it in Spanish. It works both.
okay.
But I'm
But
saying
I wanna talk
Latinx
about
is, yeah.
No, it's not Latinx if you're saying it in Spanish. That is not how Spanish language works. You are just trying to ethnicize it by saying Latinx. And no, nobody's going to fall for it. Nobody's going to be interested in it. Cut it out. Stop it right now. My Puerto Rican side shall come upon you and stop you if you do not.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that's the case here.
That's
Latinx
what I'm
was
saying.
asserted mostly by people who are gender non-conforming. So if you don't identify as, like when I
Latino,
talk about
Latina.
myself, I'm not talking about myself as Latinx. I identify as a Latina. So
But
that's
then
fine
that's
for
why
me.
they're saying that they're offended because they want to be known as a Latino. Don't name all of us Latinx.
Again, credit where credit is due. I did not expect it to be a 2-on-1 scenario. I expected all the members of this panel to be whinging and whining about how we need to use the term Latin X in order to be more inclusive, but they're pushing back because they can acknowledge that these people don't want to be called this. She can, and she's like spazzing out, talking about how the male pronoun, what you were offended by the male pronoun.
I think that it's okay if you're speaking about yourself. Why does it offend you if
About
somebody...
yourself. But
You're allowed to call yourself whatever you want
But
to call
now
yourself.
the administration, like the Biden administration, they're using this term. They're
So
no
it didn't
longer
bother you to
using-
call you men in general, but it bothers you to call you X. Do you get what So when you speak about Latinos in general, like I don't even know how to say it. When you speak about Latinx, previously we would speak about them as Latinos, which is male.
So again, this person just has it so ass backwards, it's absolutely ridiculous. She talked about how you can refer to yourself however you want. Yeah, you can refer to yourself however you want. So make the Latinx reference to people who actually want to call themselves that, so we can identify them as people that we don't want to have conversations with, and we can leave the room when they come in. But the Spanish language already has a built-in gender-neutral function function. It is the O pronoun. And she can complain about how that's also the male pronoun, but what that means is that the females in love languages actually have their own pronoun, but male pronouns do not really exist because they can be used to refer to a group of people that are mixed in gender. So in reality, the male, the O in Latino, is one of the most inclusive things that you could possibly have, and you're trying to solve a problem that does not need to be solved. And again, this all comes from people in the United States of America who don't speak Spanish. They might be Latin in heritage. You know how people, after they come through a couple of generations, they become Americanized, but for some reason they love complaining about being Americanized. A perfect example of this is those BuzzFeed videos about when they had Chinese people from different generations try Chinese food, and the elderly people were actually thought it was awesome that their culture was being included and somehow mixed in, and they're like, listen, we don't expect it to be the exact same way as Chinese culture back in China, but because there's different tastes in America, so obviously you're going to make adaptations. Meanwhile, the younger people, the spoiled brats in there, were crying about how this isn't authentic and basically becoming offended by the food that they were getting at Panda Express because it wasn't authentic to the Chinese experience. That's what we're experiencing here with the whole Latinx thing. And by the way, BuzzFeed has another version of that where they do Taco Bell to actually Hispanic people, and the elderly Hispanics compared to the younger Hispanics have similar reactions because elderly people who actually went through hardship in their lives, who weren't raised as spoiled brats on the internet, who actually lived within the cultures that they espouse and actually speak the languages, don't actually want to go back to those cultures because that's why they came to the United States in the first place.
They didn't, like, if you talk about, again, I am not one of those people. I never found offense with any of it, but I stand by people who did find offense, and I think that it's not easy to move with the times, but it is necessary.
This is what it's really all about. Latinos have rejected the term Latinx over and over again repeatedly. The more they hear about it, the more they dislike it, but she's like, you know what? I'm better than all those people. This is her Anna Kasparian moment. I like to be ahead of the times. I like to side with the people who are fighting for justice. Everybody look up to me because I'm making a stand and I'm doing something virtuous, even though, again,
The Biden administration, they're using this term.
as shown by the Biden administration putting Latinx on all the documents, this isn't actually the position of the minority, of the downtrodden. This is the position of the powerful. This is the direction they want to go. They saw a problem with Spanish people speaking the language that they've spoken for generations, and they've decided that they need to correct it.
I think most people who use the term just look for opportunities to just be progressive, and they also are looking for opportunities to be inclusive. And me personally, I always want to be a part of the ever-evolving group of people who are trying to be inclusive.
This entire segment is about language. This entire segment is about words. So I'm imploring you, listen to the language that she's using. Listen to the words that she's using. She's not talking about helping transes. She's not talking about a non-binary being stuck in a well that needs to be lifted up and brought out to safety. She's talking about her own personal vanity, how she wants to be viewed. She wants to be the girl that's seen as a part of the ever-evolving group of people, the forward-thinking trailblazers, the progressives that are always pushing the envelope forward in our society. This is pure and simple personal vanity on her part, not altruism. That's what we're seeing on display by this person.
Latinx.
I do not mind it. I refer to myself as Latina. Is it sometimes, do I catch myself and I'll be like, oh yeah, Latinos, and I have to remind myself, oh, we're now going by Latinx,
Right.
which can be
But that's a personal
annoying.
So this right here, by the way, is the definition of a humble brag. She just talked about how she wants to be a part of this ever-progressing and evolving elite that are leading the Latins, those darn Latins who can't fix their own language, forward into the future. But even she, in her infinite greatness, this woman that you need to aspire to, sometimes makes mistakes. Sometimes she speaks Spanish in the way that it was actually intended to be spoken, and she has to correct herself. She has to catch herself. You know, she's flawed, so sometimes she makes a mistake, but she always catches it because she is in fact better than you, and she is in fact a part of the forward-looking, evolving portion of the Latinx community that really, really knows what's going on. Ridiculous in every way. Again, personal vanity to the maximum on this person, and I'm so glad these two other women are actually pushing back against her.
My whole point is, I don't know what to call y'all without being I don't want to be offensive. So
Well, if you don't know, the best answer is Latinx. If you walk up to
But they just
what
said
appears
no.
50-something% of people didn't like that.
Right.
So
Why
why
people
is
like
in
that?
this day,
Credit where credit is due. This is like the most dissent I've seen on a left-wing panel in 4 years in this country. They're pushing back, and she keeps trying to say and argue that Latinx is the default. It is the category. That's the safest way to go. When they're pointing out, no, polling shows the exact opposite. Your defense was only 2% of the Hispanic population actually likes this term, and we have other polling data that shows that 50% of the people who actually heard of it are personally offended by it, so this is clearly not the safest way. But listen to her try to backpedal and readjust, but just keep going forward on the same trajectory, because this is a person who has blocked herself off to all outside information.
in this day and age, when we are having people that are coming forward and saying how they want to identify themselves, the honest answer is you don't know anymore. You don't know how to approach someone. If you are talking about someone who may appear to be of female gender, right? But they identify as whatever it is, you'd be safest approaching them and not calling them a Latina and instead saying
What about
Latinx.
Hispanic?
Wrong, incorrect, not even close. Thanks for playing, Miss Fourth String View Host knockoff panelists. Go back into the green room, reset, and try again another day. You're just wrong if you think the safest thing to do is say Latinx. Again, we have the polling data that shows only 2% of Latinos actually like this term and use it themselves. So there's a 98% chance you would be totally wrong in using it. On top of that, there's above 50% chance that if you did use it, these people would be offended by you coming at them with this ridiculous linguistic thuggery.
It's the perfect example is actors. When you're talking about a group, it is actors, which is technically the male version as opposed to actress.
Yeah.
If at some point, I'm not trying to give nobody no ideas here, okay? Where we're like actor X, I don't know.
So she's just wrong in every way. I don't care how virtuous she feels in being wrong, and credit where credit is due to these two other panelists for pushing back on it. Now, a lot of their pushback, by the way, is rooted in the fact that they don't like the term African American, and they felt that that was imposed on them by Jesse Jackson, which they went over. I'll link the full segment if you guys want to see it for yourself. There is some truth behind that. So this is one of those weird scenarios where people are actually using their personal experience against somebody who's in a group, plus they have the data on their side, that's advocating against the interests of the broader members of that group. So very interesting conversation. Well, I think that's going a little bit too far. Kind of borderline, not interesting conversation, but definitely hilarious. It will be linked in the description as always if you want to check it out. But that's really all I have for you guys today. If you like the video, then you hit the like button, which is the thing that you do to show me that you like it. You can subscribe for more content, because if you subscribe, then you will see me in your feed, theoretically, and get more content. You can follow me on all my social medias, because if you follow me, then you will be able to follow things that I'm doing. You can support me via the support links in the description box of this video, because if you support me, then that support will translate to me. This has been me talking about the thing that I talked about throughout this video, and I don't know why I summarized it at the end when most of you clicked it off. Till next time.